This is your last chance. After this, there is no turning back. You take the blue headphones. The story ends. You wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to believe. You take the red headphones. You stay listening to Franchise Flicks, and I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes. Welcome to Franchise Flicks. My name is Ted, and joining me are my co-hosts Andy and Zach. On this podcast, we task ourselves with watching movie franchises, breaking them down, and reviewing them, including franchises we've seen and loved, as well as franchises we've never seen and frankly avoided. On this episode, we're talking about the Matrix series, the movies that made a leather duster and thin sunglasses somewhat acceptable to wear in public in 1999, but more importantly, completely changed the action movie genre forever. This franchise includes 1999's The Matrix, 2003's The Matrix Reloaded, and 2003's Matrix Revolutions. So, you guys ready to talk about The Matrix?
Yeah, I'm just disappointed we're not talking about the Animatrix today, but go on.
Oh yeah, I forgot to exclusively say we're not talking about the Animatrix at all. It's not canon as far as it's not on the wiki, so but anyway.
Exactly my point.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's start with The Matrix. The Matrix is a movie that we find the main character, Neo. He's a computer hacker, and he gets wrapped up into this world that he really doesn't know anything about, where he's realizing that the world he's living in is fake and a virtual reality. And he gets rescued by this character Morpheus and his team, and they're on a mission to essentially stop the evil that is the Matrix and the programs that run it from within. And that's pretty much, I don't know if that's a great synopsis, but that's a little tidbit
it's enough for folks who have some idea of what the Matrix is to get the grasp.
Right.
Now I'm wondering, did you guys watch these movies, like all of them, like before we did this?
No.
Maybe just the first one?
No. The first one I definitely did, but I think I only watched it when it first came out. I guess I have like some vague memories of 2 just because of the dirty underground sexy dance rave scene on Zion, but that's about it. I don't know if I saw that in a clip somewhere or in the actual movie, but I remember it somehow.
That's cool. Andy, did you watch these beforehand?
Only the first one. And I like, kind of similar to Ted, where like I remember seeing scenes. I think those are trailers that are in my mind, because I remember in the second one, there's those 2 new characters that are introduced that can like do cool things that maybe we'll talk about at some point. But
wait, trailers. So were these theatrically released? I don't remember them being in theaters.
Oh yeah,
really?
These movies were huge.
They came. The problem is, Zach, they came out in the same year.
Yeah.
So very unusual.
How
and
weird is that?
I mean, at some point we might talk about like how these films came together and some of the issues in the third movie. I think like, yeah, it's weird because they go by so quickly. Like normally you get a trilogy and it goes for, at least 6 years, right? 2 years, like a movie, 2 years, or even more than that sometimes. But with this, it was like 1999 and then 2003.
Yeah, I saw the release dates. And I was thinking that's very odd to have 2 sequels, not even a year apart. It doesn't make any sense. But then when you watch it, and the end of 2 says, to be concluded. You're like, okay, so maybe this is really just like one long movie. And it was.
Yeah, essentially. And, they kind of blew their load pretty quickly with it, but,
Yeah, they did. I like that terminology.
I think they saw the CGI in the second one and they thought, we've got to use this same technology for the third one. We can't waste any time.
Oh, I know.
We can't waste any time to let it get any better because it's at its peak. It's at its peak. Yeah. So what was your experience, Zach? I don't know if you spoke on it.
I remember seeing the first one, but before I watched it again, I couldn't tell you anything about it. Couldn't tell you anything about it. Like, I probably saw it maybe even twice, but I didn't remember a lick of it. So I would consider this like my real first watch through. I did not see the second two. I didn't even know they were in theaters. I didn't even realize that was the thing. I thought they were like just B-rolls, but I figured Keanu Reeves and Lawrence Fishburne wouldn't do a straight to video.
No, movie, never.
So.
Never. But they did. I think they had their voices in the Animatrix, which was straight to video. So if Andy wants to talk about that, just kidding.
Can't talk about it.
Who are you going to talk about it to? We don't know anything about it.
Not us.
Well, yeah, you can do that later.
All right. Let's dig into the weird animation to get that out of the way. So, like, what was weird about it? Like, I guess opposed to like the movie, what was so weird about it?
Okay, so I was just muted there that entire time when I just said it was weird as fuck, the Animatrix, and it's weird anime shit. So it does a nice job of telling stories before, during the time frame of the Matrix, which is really cool. It adds to the story, but that's it. And then just weird anime shit. Weird anime shit.
So it's supplementary material to make it make more sense.
Is it like a I know you said they were short stories. Is it like a what's the Star Wars one I'm thinking of that's like for children? It's short.
Oh, like Galaxy Adventures?
Galaxy of Adventure. Yeah, just like a effed up Galaxy of Adventure.
Yes, but longer. So the shorts are, 10, 15 minutes or something like that each.
Okay.
Yeah.
I imagine more violent too.
Yeah, much more violent. Very sexualized.
I really wasn't expecting it to be so risque. Like the series, the franchise.
Sexy.
Yeah. Like it was very
movies are so sexy.
It's very sexy.
Especially the second one. I can't wait to get into it.
Very like steampunk, like ecstasy driven. the whole thing. Like if I was on EU watching this series, it would be a really good time.
Leslie and I talked about this because we watched the second one together, and there is definitely a time and a place for movies, and you can tell that this movie was made in that era because that's who it appealed to, right? If you're a target audience, the demographic is like 18 to 40-year-olds, right? So like what is the cool vibe sexy thing? It's like raves and shit. So like that makes sense what this is appealing to as a cultural cornerstone of big franchise movies.
Yeah, without a doubt. It was very early 2000s.
Absolutely. So do we want to get into specifically the Matrix to start off here, now that we've talked a tiny bit about the Animatrix as much as we will ever talk about it?
You'll never touch on that again. Yeah, sure. So I think you went over the plot details. I mean, it doesn't really get more complicated than that. Neo's the one, right?
Yeah, I guess other than the fact that it is interesting. I do like the plot point, even though it was supposed to be that, I guess originally the intended purpose of the movie was going to be that the people were tethered together for a neural network rather than being used as batteries. But it essentially is the same thing in the end, as far as machines are using people for something that they shouldn't be for nefarious reasons, and people are rising up to stop it.
Let me tell you one thing I find interesting about that. I feel like, so the battery thing, so they're using humans as energy.
Right.
And I feel like, and there's a lot of instances in this where it's like, well, the reason doesn't matter. It's where we are now that matters. It's the situation that we're in that matters. And like this comes up time and time again, where even like the Agent Smiths will be like, the reason doesn't matter. Like, well, it kind of does. And I wish it would be a better reason. Like, I don't like this reason. I feel like it just doesn't make sense for it to just be used as energy. That was one of the biggest problems I had with just the intro, the Matrix.
Yeah.
Like energy, really? They couldn't find any other energy source than humans?
Right. And that actually becomes a problem later on. Sorry, Andy.
No, I was just gonna say, if you watch the Animatrix, they they actually talk about the whole problem more. But I think that's something to definitely pick apart a movie. That's something you can attack this for, is that this story, this plot of the Matrix, there are some very loose threads that are like grounding this thing together. The whole motivation for the machines. If it's their lifeblood, humans, okay, that's a loose thread to hang that on. But if you take a step back and don't worry about those nitpicky details, it's like a hero's journey. Neo is the one, as you just referenced. Maybe is, maybe isn't. That's kind of like what you're left with at the end of it. It looks like he is, but he was told he wasn't. So which is it? But that's like what you're getting from this. So I actually care less about those elements, which are expanded on in the supplemental material. I really appreciate that this is a hero's journey. And when you appreciate the movie for those reasons, you don't need to worry about all of those things that get thrown at us that are maybe weak. I get it. No, I get it.
What I do.
Yeah, but I kind of look at this first Matrix movie as something similar to, and I don't know if you guys are fans of these, but the Fast and Furious movies, those are kind of movies that are action for the sake of action. And this movie, for a lot of it, seems like it's action for the sake of action, as far as fist fights, gun fights, everything you can imagine, as far as just these wild visuals for combat. And I actually think that the plot works for this as a one-off. If the Matrix were just a one-off, you would care, I think, a lot less about humans being used as batteries, all this other stuff about Zion, about everything. If it just ended after the Matrix, I think it would have been a movie that, well, didn't make the most sense, but it's fine because it delivered in really cool areas, and I don't really need to know anything more about that. And I think, as we'll get into it later, that's one of the pitfalls of this series, is maybe it didn't need to get into the other parts of the story. Maybe this thing wasn't so fleshed out that it even meant for anything to go any further from this. It probably should have just been a one-off, but you guys know studios, they get a little greedy. They see something's popular and a success, and they want to cash in on that, and that's what happened here.
Keanu, bro.
Yeah, and Keanu and all the actors probably signed multi-film deals, and they were stuck with it, and that's fine. And they did the best they could with it. But ultimately, I think it would have been better off as a one-off movie. And I think if it were, the Matrix on its own would be remembered even better than it is. And I still think, as a solo movie, it's remembered pretty fondly for what it brought to cinema on the whole.
I agree. Yeah. I mean, if you take just The Matrix as an isolated movie, it's a good movie. Like, I can pick it apart from like a technical standpoint. But like I said, The Matrix is a movie. It was so much fun to watch. Like I could watch that over and over again and never get sick of it. It's just, it's got that hidden tiger dragon, what is it called, what's that movie?
Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon. Like those martial arts is very kung fu based, very Asian martial arts based, and it's action. It's just energetic. Like, the movie itself is fun, but a lot of it, I think it wants to be this like ethereal technical movie, and it just falls a little bit short of that expectation for me. And I wouldn't put that expectation on it if it didn't put that expectation on itself. It just kind of feels that way, like it's trying to be like that, and it doesn't quite meet it because of all of those holes and those little just details that don't quite make sense, or don't quite add up, or don't quite give me the satisfaction that I'm looking for when I'm thinking of that kind of ethereal movie, or that kind of that high level overview
movie, like your Inceptions or your things like that.
This does ask a lot of those questions, though, throughout the movie. Like, what is the nature of reality, free will versus determinism? That's a lot of what this movie deals with. And so, if you can,
question, but does it execute?
I think so. As a standalone movie, yes. Don't think about the other movies. Just think about what this is asking. You don't want to give away those answers right away. And I think the movie itself does a good job of you like thinking about those things, imagining what it would be like to then live in this world. Where you know if you actually have, agency over your actions. Your whole life has been pieced together as this sort of jigsaw puzzle that you have really no control over. So that's life. Like, how do we know that we're not in the Matrix right now? When you ask those types of questions, that's what you can have outside of the movie. And I think in that specific instance right there, the movie does a great job.
I agree with that, actually. And I think, to your point, a good example of that, like that self-determination, Neo is told by seemingly the most powerful and wise person in this series, the Oracle, that he's not the one. But then later on in the movie, when he has to, he just decides that I believe in myself. I might not be the one, but I'm going to act like I'm the one. Obviously, he ends up dying and then being brought back to life like a Disney princess. But that aside, I really do think like he almost made his own reality and his own destiny in a way by determining, well, I don't care. If I have to be the one right now, then I'm going to be the one. And I think that kind of, as far as that the series is concerned, it almost seems like he changed the prophecy, that he decided that he was going to be the one. And that doesn't get more self-determination than that.
Yeah. So actually, that's a really beautiful point there, Ted, because that is exactly what happens. Not to spoil the whole point of this movie, but if Neo is in fact the one, and what we learn throughout the next two movies is that everything he's done has been done before, up until we are watching the instance in this movie, this iteration of this thing. And what's different about this one and what's answered in the last movie, in the very last, major sequence, I'll save it for when you get there, but is this very question, is determinism versus free will. And Neo, the one, he chooses. That's the power here. He decides.
Yeah. In a world where you can pretty much do anything you set your mind to, he did all of that and more. Absolutely.
Yeah, I think that the overall themes can be extracted from the movie and the sequences themselves. But I think again, it's the really the technical aspect of how they get there that kind of bugs me. Again, I think the themes are there, and you can find them, you can extract them for sure. I think everything that you guys are talking about is there, but that's the kind of like movie watcher, especially when I'm watching like intently and for a reason. I want to flesh out everything in the movie, and a couple of those themes fall short for me. I do think that the theme of, if you set your mind to it, you can do it, is there, but kind of in an interesting way, right? I think the Oracle character is really interesting, and a really pivotal character to that theme in particular. Even the some of the lines that she talks about was like, well, I told you were going to do it, so would you have done it if I didn't say that? Right? It's that thought of free will. Yeah. Is it determined, or is it? Are you making it happen because you know it's going to happen, or is it you who's going to make it happen because you want it to happen? Where is that line? And I don't know that the movie actually answers that question. I feel like the movie does point towards, well, you're destined to do it. The franchise, I guess.
The franchise, yeah. The movie itself, I think, leaves it an open-ended question. It gives the answer, and I think that's like the point of it, because it was originally, I think as Ted addressed earlier, like maybe not intended to become a trilogy of movies, that it was intended to be a Hollywood blockbuster movie that would make some money, and then Hollywood wants to do a cash grab and make more. As a self-contained story, when it has you as the audience ask those sorts of questions, and it doesn't give you a direct answer, just like Inception, in the very end scene of Inception, leaves you hanging there. This movie kind of does the same thing. It leads you down a path to get you to think one way, think this way, get a discussion, a debate going amongst your friends as you leave the theater. And then in the later movies, we get those answers to maybe our liking or not. So...
You think so? So I guess that's my question to you. So you think it definitively answers in the latter two movies? I know I'm jumping ahead here, but you think it definitively answers the question of fate versus choice, destiny, versus really?
Yep. In kind of like a weird way, and not necessarily in a good way either. So I don't think I don't personally enjoy it, but it does answer it.
Okay. Be interesting to get into that once we get to that final movie.
Yeah. I would like to talk about that. So, all right, the first movie we kind of like talked like the description of it, some of the themes in it, like.
All right, let's talk about the fun stuff.
Yeah, the fun stuff. Like,
fuck yeah,
dude, action in this movie is fucking cool,
dude.
It still holds up, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd say the only things that don't really hold up are just some CGI things here and there, as far as like some like electricity and at the end when Agent Smith blows up, when he kind of just fragments and blows up, that doesn't really hold up. But bullet time fucking holds up. The choreography is incredible in this movie, even when you take out slow motion and 360 motion of a camera to see the entirety of the character in the room. It just, again, revolutionary stuff for film at the time in 1999, and like everything tried to copy this going forward, whether it was parodying it or just trying to cash in on it. Everything was copying it, and they were cashing in on it in one way or another. It didn't really matter if you're making fun of it or not. The reference was there. It's such a pop culture icon. It still holds up, and it's incredible. And I said this before we started streaming here. It's the closest, and I'm a huge Dragon Ball Z fan, it's the closest I will ever get, I think, to like flying through the air, punches hitting, and going at full speed Dragon Ball Z type fight. And it's just awesome. I love it. And throw guns in there too. Incredible.
Dude, I love the Kung Fu, Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, like that whole like Asian influence on the fight sequences is just awesome. Like there will always be just you don't really see it, like even in like the John Wick stuff. It's more like, I don't know, it's not quite the same as like that Asian flair Kung Fu style fighting. I just love it. I just love that type of action. But beyond that, like you were saying, the CGI is super cool. Like not all of it. Like I know I don't want to jump ahead too much, but like this, I feel like they stayed within their limits in the Matrix, right? Everything in that movie pretty much holds up today, whereas I guess the technological CGI in the latter two movies is not good. I didn't like it.
Yeah, it goes too far for what was capable then. Actually, I had that same thought, Zach, watching the third one. I was like, wow, a lot of this, if it was done today, would be badass. But this was in 2003.
They tried too much with the technological limits that they had. But I think that, given that in the first movie, The Matrix, which is the one we're talking about, they did a great job at staying within their limits and making it look as good as what they could do possibly could. And so I thought they did an awesome job with all of it. I mean, it was so good. The camera pans, the slow-mo, the use of slow-mo is amazing. I couldn't get enough of it until the second and third movie, then.
Which we'll get into. Yeah.
Some other things at play there for sure.
Yeah.
You guys mentioned your favorite like action sequence already, like the bullet time. Ted, did you say that? Is that what you said?
I mean, I wouldn't say it's necessarily my favorite, but just it's so iconic. They call that doing the Matrix, essentially,
Right.
like for the layman. But it's really bullet time, and that's influenced so much in film going forward. I don't know if I have a favorite per se, but I definitely agree with Zach as far as the Asian flair to the fighting, just like how nimble Asian martial arts is when it's being executed correctly, on top of all this craziness going on in this movie as well, with the gunfighting and the slow-mo and everything. Like, it just works so well together. And I don't know if I could pick one scene in particular over the rest, but I think just overall it works so well, and you can show that to people 50 years from now, and that aspect of it is still gonna hold up.
Yeah. My favorite sequence with CGI and kind of like the martial arts stuff is when Neo and Morpheus are doing the training sequence, or like the training session. I think it's just like the idea you start with the tabula rasa, the blank slate, and then all of a sudden like things appear. Then you get into like does he go into the city first and do the whole like thing, or does that happen after the fight? I don't remember the order of it.
The city first.
First, okay.
To kind of give him an idea of like what the craziness is of being in the Matrix while also being aware of what the Matrix actually is.
Right. It's like the program with the lady with the red dress.
Yeah. Right. That's it. I just couldn't remember which happened first, going through and then getting to the fight. But I like all of that because it does a couple things. It gives you your CGI, like that's good CGI for this movie. How it does all of that stuff in there to like tell you about this. I think that part kind of holds up to today. Then you get to the cool fight, and it's the action. It's controlled. I'm not a big fan of the gunfighting in it, just because it's very loud, and like for whatever reason when I'm listening to it with my speaker, action sequences in this film are so fucking loud and dialogue is so quiet that I'm constantly having to change the volume. So anytime I had to watch an action sequence in these movies, it was like volume down.
Yeah, that could have just been because of poor compression from whoever generously provided the movies to us. Won't say how, but I found myself having that same issue. I actually watched them mostly with headphones on because I didn't want to subject my wife to a lot of it. Yeah, I mean, it was just suddenly blaring. So I think unless the sound engineers were terrible, I think that was more compression, but maybe we'll find out if we ever like buy a Blu-ray ever.
I don't know. I find that often actually with like action movies.
It happens a lot.
Yeah, they do. Like it's a thing because in the theater, it's like you feel it. It's like in your chest. You're like, oh wow, that was awesome. But you're like watching it at home, and like the walls are fucking shaking. You're like, dear God, I was just trying to hear what Neil was saying like 2 seconds ago.
Right.
But like that whole sequence, I just absolutely loved it. What?
I'm gonna fucking kill myself.
What is going on?
If I had to listen to Trinity whisper like this.
Oh.
There is a lot of Trinity whispering. This is the segment of the episode where we incorporate ASMR, by the way.
Ooh, don't tell Leslie.
Dude, it killed me. Oh God, I couldn't deal with it. The whispering between Keanu Reeves and whatever her name was. I can't remember the actress right now.
The one I thought died.
I'm blanking on it. Carrie-Anne Moss.
Carrie-Anne Moss, yeah, right. Who Andy thought died.
That's right.
Which I was forgetting which character in the franchise died. Spoiler alert. I was just mixing it up.
Who was it?
And the actress? The actress.
The actress died.
No, yes, of that character I knew like cultural. The person who plays the Oracle.
Right.
She died in between filming of the second and third one. And I knew that like as a pop culture question, and I was like, Matrix. Oh, is that like Trinity? Is she the character that's referred to?
Which, can I just say as an aside, like skipping ahead real quick, thank God they address that in some way, shape, or form instead of just making you assume that they replaced one older black lady with another older black lady and making you guess the whole time if they did. Yikes.
Nobody would notice.
Oh my God. Yeah. That would have been horrific. Christ.
Oh, Lord. All right. So I can't wait to get into those movies because they're so bad. So I think we can kind of touch on like the acting and music of this. That was one thing to me that just the drama of like the relationship between Trinity and Neo made me want to poke my fucking eyes out. It was not good. I didn't like it at all. It was too much whispering and just like lustful talk. Like it was just stupid. It didn't land.
You didn't believe in their love story that was just kind of forced upon us when no. Trinity said that she was supposed to fall in love with the one. Come on, Zach.
We haven't said this yet, and it kind of relates to plot, but I think it relates in some weird ways more so. This reminds me so much of Star Wars. This whole like as a story, which we can maybe talk about more so in the other movies, where it's the case. But in this one, the romance between Neo and Trinity is forced, just like it is between Anakin and Padme. Like, I just don't buy it in this movie at all. Like, it just doesn't feel real. There are lines occasionally, so that's where the writing, I would say, is a little better in this, where I believe the lines are something the characters would say, but I don't believe these actors would say that to one another, if that makes sense. Because in the prequels, I'd say it's the opposite. I don't think people would ever say this to one another in real life, and then obviously they're not gonna fall in love because of that. So
I think the Wachowskis did a better job than George Lucas.
Yeah, a better job, but that's the writing, not the
it's all relative.
Still real bad. It was still real bad. I just couldn't do it. That was my biggest complaint. I love Lawrence Fishburne. Everything that guy does is going to be my favorite because he's just so good. He's so much fun. He's so hokey.
Yeah, but he makes you believe in the whole thing too. Like he's so mysterious and just very smooth about everything throughout the movie. He seems to just know everything that Neo wants to know about the Matrix. And then going further into the acting, talking about another actor who I thought was superb in this movie, Hugo Weaving, just was incredible. He was the great stereotypical bad guy who actually had some depth in this movie. I'd say more than he does going forward. He kind of jumps the shark a little bit as far as his character is concerned. But just the fact that a program eventually decides he wants to do his own thing, that this program is so individualized that he will somehow separate himself from the pack. He just does such a great job. The way he delivers his lines, Mr. Anderson,
dude,
I just
so iconic.
Love it. And he like refuses to acknowledge that Neo is going by Neo. He just calls him Mr. Anderson throughout the whole thing. I love it. He's the only one who does. He's just like, fuck you and everything about you to Neo.
He is the true evil of the story, and it's really cool. I love Hugo Weaving, and that whole character is just badass. It's badass. He's supposed to be the person who's like so I want to make sure I have this straight. So the agent is basically the protector of the program. Is that kind of how it's laid out?
Protector of the Matrix, essentially. They kind of make sure that nobody is going rogue, make sure that nobody who is on the outside living in Zion is messing with the framework and the structure of the Matrix and freeing anybody else, essentially.
Also, they are in charge of keeping track of programs that go rogue. So there are programs and humans, both in the Matrix, who don't behave like they're supposed to.
So, which can kind of get confusing. Yeah. I think that gets a little more convoluted as we go into the second and third movie when we talk about like what the differences end up being between people and programs, and that just where their roles are. But as far as this movie is concerned, it's pretty concrete, laid out for you. You can tell who's a program, you can tell who's not, and you can tell who is a person strapped into the Matrix without their knowledge. And it's pretty straightforward from there. It seems to be just three camps of people who are still stuck in the Matrix, people who are out of the Matrix and on the side of Morpheus and his team, and the rest of the people in Zion, and then the programs like Agent Smith, who are out to make sure that everybody maintains the status quo and the integrity of the Matrix is not compromised.
Yes.
Okay. That's pretty much what I thought. But, as we progressed in the story, it got a little more convoluted as to what his intent actually was. Not only him, but he seems to be rogue from the other agents, and maybe I just wasn't paying close enough attention.
So that happens later on. So in the other two movies, in this first one, he's not. He is totally.
Except for he is when he takes his earpiece out.
He does start that in this movie. I was kind of alluding to that as well. Probably like 3/4 of the way through the movie is when he starts to talk about his own plans as far as he wants to get out of the Matrix. He is sick of being there and executing his code essentially, and wants to live with some semblance of free will and or take over the entire thing.
Which seems to be more his...
He says that in this movie?
Yeah.
In the Matrix? Yeah. I don't remember that.
It's when he's talking to Neo in the office building, right?
Mm-hmm.
Early on.
Maybe he's talking to Morpheus. I think he's talking to Morpheus actually when he has Morpheus as prisoner before Neo and Trinity come and save him. I think that ends up being when he speaks about that, or maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah. I remember that scene. Okay. Yeah, it's all a little complicated.
I could be wrong.
I think you might be right, Ted. Then I might just be confusing where it starts to unravel in the story.
I see it unraveling when he's talking to Neo in the office building. And he takes out his earpiece. And he's like, "Give us some privacy." That's pretty early on in the movie, and that's when you start to see the unraveling of Agent Smith.
Okay, well, this is why I was bringing up too. Is that is he a part of the thing that happens in the next movie? Is this destined to occur? Where there's always so it's not that he is being rebellious. That's what he's programmed to do, is to kind of try to work against from the inside to do this thing. Is he a program just like everyone else still? Even though he feels like he's doing this rebellious thing, he's not, because that's what he's programmed to do.
Interesting. Okay.
Because that jumps to the next movie.
I think there's also a clear, even before everything starts unraveling, I think generally amongst those programs, it seems like there's a clear hierarchy, Agent Smith is the ranking officer, so to speak, and probably how it would go as far as computer code is concerned too. I would imagine that there are things that execute in certain ways as opposed to other ones that are similar to them. I don't know, maybe I'm getting a little too far into it, but that's how I see that part of it, as far as him getting the privacy and taking out his earpiece and talking to Neo in the conference room there. I just think that they try to make it weirdly as human as they can, despite the fact that they're computer programs, and actually give these programs rank, even though if you break that down, it probably means nothing, because I would imagine they were just assigned rank when they were created.
Yeah, exactly. They're given purpose.
Yeah,
that is addressed in the Animatrix. I'll just inject that in there.
I don't care.
But it really gets me to watch the Animatrix.
Nah.
Yeah, don't waste your time.
Did you watch all of it?
Yeah.
You watched all of it, really?
Yeah, I watched it a long time ago. I was an anime kid for a little while. There was an anime phase where I was into it, and the Animatrix was oh, this is super cool.
Oh, so you watched it prior to what we're doing here.
Mm-hmm. And then I did a speed watch of it. I fast forwarded through the first one because I really don't care for it. And then the second one's really trippy. Third one, that's with the weird anime thing. I skip over that one. Then there's I really like the one later on where it's like this. I won't get into it, but it ends pretty well. Some cool stuff.
Okay. All right. So listen, guys, we've talked about the first movie now for a while. Let's get into what is it? Reloaded? Is it the second one?
Yes.
Yeah. It's bad. It's a bad movie.
It's the worst, I would say.
Here's the thing. I think the third one makes it better. I think without the third one, it's an atrocious movie.
Yeah.
Because that's why I said earlier, I felt like it was just one long movie. And I understand why they were released in the same year, because why I don't understand that they had to replace the actress in the third movie because it looked like they were filmed back to back. And it almost felt like
she died during shooting. I'm pretty sure is what happened.
During shooting? Really?
Yeah, I think that's what it was. I'm gonna look that up right now actually to see what that was about, because I remember that being like a thing, like of the zeitgeist, right? Of our time, a headline that the Oracle Matrix.
Was this even a headline?
Yeah,
that's how bad it was. She couldn't even wait until the final movie.
It's so fucked up.
Well, I had to say it. I thought about not saying it, but I did it anyway. So here I am.
I love it.
We can edit that out, right?
No, it's staying in, brother.
Well, you know what? You're probably going to clip that and make that the intro, so can't wait.
Yeah, I definitely am. That's going in the intro.
Well, while Andy's looking that up, why don't we get into some of the details for this movie? So we pick up where we left off with the last movie. You confirmed it, Andy?
Yeah, she died before they even filmed. Before they even filmed, not like during what they were shooting, but before they filmed.
Before they filmed the third one?
Yeah, they probably took a break in between. That's probably in like the actor's contract where there was like that they need some kind of break. And they do other movies too, so I'm sure that
it was just so sequential that it seemed like they would have filmed it back to back, but I guess not.
Unfortunate. Anyway, we kind of pick up where we left off with the last movie. Neo is seemingly the one as far as the way things ended there.
I have to push back on we picked up where we left off. Neo is now a fucking full-fledged Jedi.
Yeah.
Who can do whatever he wants.
You're right. He can fly. He can pretty much do whatever he wants. And which kind of causes some problems with some of the things that happen in this movie, and him kind of being a little bit overpowered. And it seems like the writers tried to find ways to keep him out of scenes just so he couldn't end them by being super OP. But as far as like chronologically, I guess it seems like it takes over pretty close to where we left off, as far as where the first one ended, and then we're kind of transitioning into this is the first time we're going to see Zion ever, and it's seemingly Neo's first time. So you get to Zion. There's a lot of political talk, kind of going back to Andy's point, talking about the prequels of Star Wars. Very reminiscent of those movies, as far as about a half an hour worth of just drivel as far as political talk that we don't really care for.
Exposition.
Yeah.
Well, keep in mind as well, these are made at the same exact time. These movies are made at the same exact time. That was a very common thing to do in movies around 1999 and the early 2000s. It was very kind of that punk political message in the early 2000s. So anyway, keep going.
Yeah, but so anyway, we have a little bit of that, definitely exposition like Andy said, and then we kind of get into there's a little bit of a subplot where Agent Smith is back for some reason, somehow. Doesn't really get explained all that much, other than he says Neo set him free when he killed him, which don't really know what that means, but I guess we'll get into that. And he's infecting other programs, and eventually he actually infects a human within the Matrix, which is really interesting. A human that lives in Zion as well, not just any person. So that's a really interesting part of that. I actually enjoyed that part of it. But so that's a little subplot going on, and he kind of shows up and then disappears for about half the movie and comes back toward the end. There's a weird subplot with this Frenchman who's a program, who has a wife program, and that doesn't really make much sense. That kind of brings me to my point earlier about, like, where's the line that we draw between what humans are in the Matrix and what programs are in the Matrix? And these programs are seemingly in love, and the wife of the Frenchman program wants Neo to kiss her, make her feel something for the first time in a long time, which, again, very odd talking about programs. And then I guess skipping ahead, we kind of get to the framework of the Matrix and the creator of it, who's the architect, and all he kind of does is he's supposed to talk exposition wise, but he just uses big words for the sake of using big words, it seems like, and doesn't really explain much. And that's kind of where we leave off in that movie. I mean, let me know if I missed anything, guys. I'm kind of just spitballing about the plot summation here, but we can get into specifics here as well.
I think one of the big things that needs to be mentioned is that, you know, now not only do we have the one ship of people that have been pulled from the Matrix, we have a whole city basically, right, which is Zion, right, of the people who have been pulled from the Matrix and brought into the real world of machines,
or people who were born, because there are some people there who are not, you know, born in the Matrix.
Correct. Yes. So anybody who has consciousness in the real world that is inhabited by machines lives in Zion, essentially. For maybe there's more, but our story takes place in Zion.
Animatrix talks about it.
Oh, really? I'd be interested to hear.
I wouldn't.
So Zion is the kind of our central home base. Becomes a lot more important as we move through the story, but I just wanted to point that out because in the original Matrix, it was really just this one ship, but that ship has a home, and that home is Zion.
Thank you, Zach. I actually appreciate you filling that part in.
Where they rave.
Oh yeah, we got to get into that. So yeah, that's pretty much the movie. So let's get into the details like we did with the first one here. So talking about the plot, kind of a nonsensical plot. It kind of just, to me, it kind of just went along a weird path. It just seemed like a lot of times they were doing things for the sake of doing things in the movie, it seemed like. You know, halfway through the movie, they're told by the Oracle to find the key maker. Who's the key maker? Doesn't really get explained. He makes keys, apparently, that get into any door into it within the Matrix. But his significance, I guess, other than getting to the architect, is really convoluted. And as far as how they get there is really weird as well. I don't know. The plot of this movie just was everywhere for me. I don't know if you guys got a better sense of where it was trying to go, but it just seemed like it had a starting point and it had an ending point, and it didn't really know what to do in the middle of it.
There was a lot of fighting.
That's true.
Yeah. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about that when we get there. Okay. I do want to, you know, jump in on like saving some of this plot here, because I agree from a writing perspective of the story, and dialogue. There's some of that here with these new characters that we were introduced to. But basically, we had this, in my opinion, a nice self-contained story in the first Matrix. And then when we got a sequel, they cracked their knuckles and opened this shit up. where we got everything. We got the raves in Zion. We got the things going on with the Sentinels. We're seeing more of them and all these other things. All like just super expands on the story. Maybe too much, and that's probably the problem where there's so much happening, especially with exposition that we just saw what Zach put in the chat. Thank you, Zach. Totally throwing me off now. That we have to kind of like, we never get a chance to catch our breath, to think of like, let's settle down, let's ask those more deep questions about these things. You're giving us a lot of answers to questions that we never asked before. So like the Keymaker, like who's this guy? Like, why do we care about him? I think it's paid off in the end, and I'll talk about when we get to the third movie, and that's my defense of it, is that some of this stuff, like, I don't like how it's done, but I like the intention of it. I like what they were trying to do. Don't necessarily think the execution landed with these movies.
No, execution had a lot to be desired. I think there was just, was it Ted? Maybe you just said there's a start point and an end point. Yeah. And the rest of the movie really seemed like filler. Like a lot of it seemed like filler. There were some pivotal plot points in it, but nothing really with an overarching arc, right? I mean, there's no real through line through the whole thing. And it was kind of just jumbled and all over the place, and it was hard to follow. It didn't make much sense to me.
Well, let me push back. There are 3 characters you want to pay attention to. What's going on with them? You want to pay attention to what's happening with Neo, what's happening with Mr. Smith, and what's happening with the Oracle. Those are the 3 important characters to play. And the Oracle, I would say, like, her ancillary character that you need to pay attention to, which is introduced towards the end of the film, is the Architect. So think of them as kind of like 2 sides of the same coin. Same thing with like Neo and Mr. Smith. You can think of them as 2 sides of the same coin, where those are the stories that you want to pay attention to. Everything else that's happening like around it is all this lazy exposition stuff to just fill in the gaps in between. Like, we need to care about the people in Zion. So we've got a dude who his like girlfriend, wife, baby mama situation. I'm not sure exactly what their relationships is. I don't remember, but like he's now a crew member on the ship, and he's got
Michael from Lost.
Michael, okay, that dude from Lost. I couldn't think. I was like, where have I seen this guy from? But like, where we get all this other stuff, and it's like, this has nothing to do with what we actually need to pay attention to understand like what this movie's getting at. This is just to give us heart and soul, things to care about, and I don't think we really need to care about
messy.
them.
Yeah, it was messy.
No, and none of that worked either.
No, it didn't work.
How
didn't make
long
you care.
did they spend on the fucking freeway? Way too long. The answer is way too long. They didn't need to spend that much time on the fucking freeway. Like,
I actually liked that scene from like an action perspective. I thought that was like one of the more
scene.
Yeah, I agree. But it was one of the more well executed action scenes in the movie. But at the same time, you've got the weird albino digital ghost twin that are chasing them, which I don't even know what to make of them. That was something else. I'm not sure how that happened or why it happened, but it did. But yeah, I enjoyed that part as far as the execution. But that's another scene where you get back to what I said earlier, where this movie went out of its way to keep Neo out of scenes because they made him way too powerful at the beginning of this movie, when they could have just left him where he was at the end of the last movie. Or they could have gone with another trope in movies, which is, okay, he tapped into this power this time, but maybe it was just in this moment where he was revived and he doesn't really know how to tap into it again. They could have done so many things with that. Instead, they went a step further, made Neo even more overly powerful at the beginning of this movie, and had to write around the fact that he was too powerful to even be in this thing. And the only time it ends up working is in the next movie because they hinder him in some way, and we'll get into that. But like, they literally wrote themselves into a corner by making him able to fly and making him pretty much omnipotent.
Let me interject one thing. I think in the movie they say, "Where's Neo?" Oh, he's doing his Superman thing.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, that's the exact argument we had for the DCEU.
Yes.
Why Superman was just an irrelevant character because he's just too powerful. He's too powerful. You have to, in order to make him interesting, you have to inhibit him. And that's the only time. And I don't think the second movie did a great job at the Neo exposition. I think the third movie did a much better job at making him interesting. This is Superman. Yeah. It was Superman from the beginning. Didn't make sense.
Yeah, and that's exactly what they did in that scene. They had to force the moment where he can't get out of the Frenchman's house or the restaurant, wherever they were, just so they can keep him out of that scene that goes way too long, and make it interesting and make there actually be stakes. And there's several scenes in this movie that there are no stakes, and we can talk about it later as far as like the CGI and action portion of it. But just from a logistical and plot and writing standpoint, the fight against Agent Smith makes no sense too, because he ends up flying away in the end. He could have done that at any point instead of fighting any of them, and it's just a waste of time. This movie just creates its own problems, and the writing is the biggest problem. And Andy, you're right. They, I think, tried to do too much with the world building. Like, kudos for trying to world build around this movie that probably should have only been one film, but you can't load too much into it at one time. If you need to, we've talked about this with numerous films, whether it's like Star Wars with the sequel trilogy most recently. If you need to make more films, people are not going to be upset if you make more films and drag these things out if you can flesh out a better story. I don't know why they don't do these things. It's more money in their pockets, it's a more satisfied customer who's going to come back when in 15 years you introduce the Matrix 4. Lo and behold, they're doing that, but people are probably, even though they're going to be excited about this, there's still people who have a sour taste in their mouths from 2 and 3 from this series, and I won't be surprised if they don't watch it.
They didn't pump out 2 sequel Matrix movies in 1 year because it was a passion project.
Yeah.
It was to make money. I mean, that's what these are for. They were banking on Keanu Reeves and the Matrix name to make some cash on a 90-minute movie. And I'm sure they did.
Oh, absolutely.
And there were aspects of it that I enjoyed, but overall, this movie was a mess.
Funny, I just wanted to look up the... Oh, wait, that's the third one. Rotten Tomatoes to see what's going on with it. It's Matrix Reloaded. That's what we're talking about right now.
Yeah.
Surprisingly, it's a certified fresh, and the audience score is 72.
Stop it.
Yeah.
Are you serious?
Yeah, you're looking at these movies definitely through a modern lens.
More critical lens.
90s, like these movies, way like that's the kind of movies they made back then. These are 90s action sci-fi, which kind of like fell apart in like the 2000s. That's when it gets bad. It's like early 90s CGI, it's really bad now, but it was like wow back then. And then 2000s was weird. It's because everyone decided to like push the envelope with movies that they had no business pushing the envelope with. It was just too bad. And so like the Matrix Revolutions, tomato meter, it's rotten, it's 35%, but the audience score is still 60. So it's still more than half the reviews are still positive for the movie. And I get it. I get the reasons, the things you can enjoy about this movie. Yeah, like check those boxes on your list. The things you can dislike about those movies, absolutely check those off as well. But people who like it aren't looking at those boxes you probably just checked off.
True.
That's a very good outlook on it, for sure. I agree.
Yeah, it's a good perspective to bring into it.
If I could just push back on the because it kind of blends into the next topic, which is the fight sequence, but you tied it to the plot. I also don't like the Mr. Smith versus Neo fight that happens, because it's like way too long.
Mr. Smiths?
Yeah, it's like way too long. Literally, that was the moment Leslie and I turned to one another and was like, is this over yet? Like, we need to just this end. And we just started like yelling at it, like, please end. But from a plot perspective, I liked it because this is the first thing that challenges the Superman Neo. So that's what he introduces us to, is that he's not omnipotent. He is not omnipotent. He is, in fact, it is possible for him to lose. He had to test that. The reason why he wanted to defeat Mr. Smith was so he could actually defeat him, but what he kept realizing was, no, I can't, and then finally it broke him enough to realize, no, I gotta get out of here. I'm not ready for this fight.
Okay, that's an interesting thought on it, and I get that for sure. But at least my perspective on most of the fights and the action sequences in this movie they're just there to be there, because they're expected to be there, because there was action and good action in the first movies. And I thought they tried to top themselves way too much in these movies, and they just wrote themselves into a corner in a lot of it. And they definitely, to your point, dragged them out for too long. If we're talking about scenes that went on too long, it's that scene, it's the scene on the highway, and it's the Zion rave underground sex party scene that went on for seemingly forever, and I think that might have actually been the shortest one, which is crazy to me
too. You know,
the Frenchman scene for sure. Yeah,
you're absolutely right. I think a lot of this movie was just extended scenes so they could fill that 90-minute quota.
This movie could have been 30 minutes.
100% it could have been. They could have made a really long sequel.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, instead of making it 2 movies, they could have made just a really long sequel, and it would have been fine.
And it might have flowed better.
Yeah, but you know, I think so. Let's get into. I mean, we've really beat the shit out of this movie. Let's get into the actual like action and CGI, because I have some mixed feelings about this category in particular being split between action and CGI, because I really liked the action. I hated the CGI.
No, that's a good contrast to talk about, though. How like you like the action sequence, but then the CGI they use, yikes.
It was yikes. I mean, it was like the CGI. I think we might have touched on this already, but they really just tried to push the envelope beyond what they did in The Matrix. And I just don't think the technology was there to keep up with it yet. I mean, when they were in those Pacific Rim robots, it looked not good. It was like really jarring, really jarring. And that's just one example. On the contrary, I loved the action sequences, and they were really long and way too drawn out. But I mean, it was always interesting to watch, you know, like the Smiths versus Neo fight. It was never the same sequence of moves together. They were introducing new components. They were doing different choreography, and that was consistent throughout the different fights. They were really interesting choreography. They were just too long. That was my big criticism about it.
Yeah. Too long, and like you said, they really pushed the limits of the technology at the time, you know, especially with some of the moves they tried to pull in that's when you really see the flaws in that CGI, is when you've got him spinning with the pole in his hand in midair. He looks like Mr. Fantastic, just made out of rubber. Yeah. It's comical at a certain point, but at the same time it is fun because they're not lazy about it. It's really one of those things, like you said, like where you're feeling torn, because you can like almost feel the love and passion that the people who choreographed and constructed this put into it. But there's also just like, unfortunately, the limits of the time and the limits of the technology put them in that boat. Plus the constraints of, well, we've got to make this over the top way better than the last movie. And that's probably studio pressure to do that. And that's really tough to meet those standards. So it's a mix of a lot of things that go into it. And it just makes for an overall poor product. But you can feel and see some of the good parts of that intertwined within it, but overall the bad sticks out like a sore thumb.
Piggyback off of that, Ted, I think some of the things, you already mentioned this before, the sequence of fighting on the highway, It's actually pretty cool, and I think it's well done. We've already said that it might be too long, but I don't mind the CGI that happens, like when they're hanging over and about to fall off, but they don't, from the back of the truck. It was fun. I enjoyed how it all plays out. It was like predictable in some ways, like I could see where things were gonna go with it. I like when movies do that, where they don't, disrupt what my expectations were. They kind of like lead me to it, and it's satisfying in the end. Again, caveat being it was maybe too long. But the things that do bother me, that's the problem with this movie, is they just stick out so much. Like, that's where I have issue. Specifically with these scenes. The fight scene at the Frenchman's place when they're in this, like, what'd you call it? The entrance room or whatever, and it's got the staircase foyer. Okay, the staircase is going up, and all the weapons. I think I said this aloud. It was like, the only reason why we're here right now when we see these weapons is to have this fight. That's the only reason why. Like, why are these weapons here? They're not here because that they would be here. No, they're here so we can have a crazy fight with all these fucking different weapons. Like, every weapon.
Worf pulls daggers to him.
Yes. Yes. So, like, that. Too much for me. Too much for me.
Yeah, I agree. That was the worst of them, I think.
Yeah, it's just a syndrome of the early 2000s, late 90s, where how can we make this so fucking cool? Like, everything has to be badass. And that's all everybody was thinking. And, kind of goes back to, I think, Zach's point earlier, where it very much is of its time. And you can see with the Rotten Tomato scores why they were thought of more fondly than we're thinking of them right now, because they weren't looked at in a critical lens, because movies of the time were very much of that time, where people were just looking for a movie that would push the envelope as far as what CGI could do, what technology could do. And there was little care, especially in action movies, for plot. And I get that to a certain extent. Sometimes you watch an action movie just for the sake of having some action. We're actually like in this wonderful age right now where we have a beautiful mix of both, where we have brilliant CGI that meets the expectations, and very rarely you can see the flaws in it, but you can also have those action sequences with a lofty and full plot that makes sense and makes people feel satisfied. So this movie and the next movie are kind of finding the footing, I guess, for action movies in the early 2000s and leading to where we would eventually get. So still, like the first one, it does lead us down the path to where we eventually get to, but it's not as influential in a positive standpoint.
What's interesting is I was just doing a little bit of research while you were talking here. The second Matrix, The Matrix Reloaded, is the highest grossing film of the franchise. And I would argue it's the worst film of the franchise.
I can see that, though, because The Matrix was so good, and it probably was one of those things that didn't do well probably on opening day, and was more of a word of mouth. You've got to see this movie. It's amazing. Keanu Reeves is awesome in it. There's awesome action. There's this incredible computer-generated stuff going on. And then the expectations just built and built and built to the second one, and everybody was ready to see the second one like it was Empire Strikes Back. Yeah. I'm sure that had to have been the lofty expectations that drove that. But that happens all the time.
Well, and clearly, like, based on the tomato meter and the audience score for it, that was true. Like, if more than half the people left that theater on opening night and then subsequent showings and thought, like, yeah, this was a good movie, because that's what the tomato meter does. It says, looks at critics, and it says, okay, who had positive reviews, what percentage of them. So if something has more than 50% or 60%, something like that, what is it for? Is it 70 maybe? I forget what the exact number is.
I think you said in the 70s, yeah.
No, I mean for like what the threshold for for fresh, yeah.
I think 70 is fresh.
Yeah. So like that tells you right there that it fit, like, as we already mentioned, the zeitgeist, and how those are the expectations for those types of movies when you go into them and what you're gonna get. That's why I think the third one is actually the worst one, because it doesn't deliver the same way that the second one does. It actually, like, things are, in some ways, they're darker. You're not getting all of the cool, super fun action sequences that are bright and shiny. It's much more of a dark movie, but we'll talk about that later.
Yeah, one of the I just wanted to kind of interject here. One of the things that I found, another thing I found annoying about this movie and the franchise as a whole after the first movie, is the amount of Easter eggs they tried to force into the subsequent movies. Like, I don't know if you noticed, like, how many times they tried to reference the first movie as like a nostalgic point. Like, he got the spoon from the kid.
Oh yeah,
right. Like, it's just all sorts of stuff like that. Like, I watched them all in pretty quick succession, so maybe it stood out.
Rememberies.
It's just like, yeah, it's just like, you liked this one, right? So here's a little tidbit for you.
Yeah.
And it was just bad Easter eggs. It wasn't even like clever Easter eggs.
Yeah, and probably 4 years later, for people seeing it in theaters, they're like, the fuck does a spoon have to do with anything?
Right, yeah, you're totally
No,
right.
the bros were like, dude, it's the spoon! It's the spoon! He's doing the spoon!
Talked about this on my blog.
Dude, I was holding a spoon, and I swear, bro, I swear on my my Nokia that I bent it.
It's amazing, bro.
My NV2, bro. So what did you guys think about the acting in this? I'm gonna hit on the music here in a minute.
Oh yeah, I want to talk about the music. I don't fucking care about acting.
What you think about the overall acting performances? We have a few new characters. You know, we see Neo pretty much half the movie, whereas as opposed to like the full thing in the first one. We have familiar characters in Trinity and Morpheus, but how do you feel the acting chops were?
I thought the characters that were a little wooden, like Neo in the first one, were actually a little better in this one, and I think that's part of the design, because I think he knows himself a little better and he's a little more self-actualized in this movie. So he acts like he's Superman in this movie, and he acts like he loves Trinity, even though it doesn't make sense that he does. It doesn't really matter for us. He does deliver as far as, well, in this movie I believe it, even though they didn't really set it up in any way, shape, or form. I believe it. And you know what, we also got to see in the Zion scene his vinegar strokes, essentially, when he simultaneously, I thought, finished and also saw the vision of Trinity dying, which was a pretty interesting part.
Weird scene. Yeah.
So the question becomes there, Ted. Does he finish before it happens, while it's happening, or after it happens?
I think it's one of those things where he starts and then it ruins it. You know, he's there, and then he starts seeing that vision, and then it just, you know, that come down from that high is just exponential, and it just snaps him right back to reality. Like, oh shit, first of all, that ruined my finish here, ruined
like
that
the
nut.
gravity of the sun.
Yeah. It ruined it, and he also saw his girlfriend dying, which is a double bummer, I think. And I think that's something that Keanu Reeves would probably say in real life. Double bummer.
Double bummer, bro.
But yeah, I thought the acting was better in this one, and they were kind of constrained by the crummy story that they were stuck in. But I thought the acting was better. I thought the characters were a little more self-actualized, and if the movie had done a better job of it, I actually would have been on board with the characters that they tried to force you to care about. It's just they didn't do a great job of making you care about them, because they just introduced them to you. I think like the only connection that the character Link, who was played by the guy from Lost, had to the original crew was he was the brother-in-law of I don't remember their names, like Tank or
Dozer, I think was
Tank and Dozer, I think, like super just tough guy names for these dudes, apparently. I don't know if those are their birth names. I'm really curious about that. I found myself wondering about that. Like, were they born outside of the Matrix, and were they named Tank and Dozer because people didn't really know what to name people because they haven't been people for so long? Or are those just nicknames? But it doesn't really matter. I just don't think they executed on actually getting you to care about those things. But I think overall the acting was better, and it just unfortunately falls flat overall because everything around it sucks.
Yeah, I agree everything you said, Ted. I think some of the weak characters, though, make it so if I had to like weigh the acting in this film, I don't know if I'd say it was better than the first film, but the things that stick out to me, like the kid, I don't remember his name, but the one that's like obsessed with Neo because he saved him.
He's obnoxious.
Yeah, his character does get explained a little more in the Animatrix, but
I want to watch it less now.
Yeah, exactly. You don't want to characterize this character, but like I find it like he's annoying and the acting isn't good. I hate that when it's done in movies where they take a character who's supposed to be young and it's played by an actor who's clearly much older than the age of the person. Like, I just don't understand why we can't have an actor that's close. It takes you out. Like, that chick's like 40 years old and she's supposed to be playing a 20-year-old character, you know? Or that dude, in this instance, he's like supposed to be, I think, 16 and he looks like he's 30. So like, it's hard to like care for this character when I don't even believe he's the person he's portraying.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's a problem across the board in pretty much media in general.
Yeah, it happens often, but that's like a problem with like a big budget film like this, you know? Like, they just they throw it away for things like that in a really well done movie you believe those characters, like an actual like Oscar worthy movie where every character you believe is that character. These ones, they play more like larger than life type of characters, not down to earth.
Can I tell you my favorite character?
Yeah.
Can I tell you my favorite character? Is Cornel West. Whoever Cornel West plays is my favorite character. I love that guy.
Essentially the Jedi Council member.
Yeah, he's like
it's Cornel West,
the Mace Windu with a PhD.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was so happy to see him. I had no idea he was in this movie.
So we watched the second one together, Leslie, and I stopped in the middle of the movie. I was like, who is that? Like, I couldn't, like, it was one of those out of place moments where we're like, that's not an actor. I know that face from somewhere. Who is that? I'm like, oh my god, what the fuck is his name? I'm blanking. And I was like, no way, it's Dr. Cornel West. Like, what the F? He's actually in this movie? Yeah. What?
Yeah.
What?
And talk about taking people out of the movie. Nothing takes you out of something more than somebody who does not belong as an actor within a movie. Especially when they're not playing themselves. If it's Dr. Cornel West playing Dr. Cornel West, then that's okay.
Maybe he was. What's his name? Maybe he was. Maybe it's just a transposed version of Cornel West in the Matrix. Or
you know what?
Zion.
You might be right. I really don't know. And I don't care. Well, you're going to find out. I don't care.
Do you want to know Cornel West's name in the Matrix Reloaded?
I do. Okay.
It's Counselor West.
Come on. That's lazier than everything else in this movie. That's super lazy.
But it's so fitting because all their names: Tank, Dozer, West.
Right.
Oh man.
That's my only comment on the acting. I think overall it's bad. I can't take Carrie-Anne Moss whispering in my ear anymore. Keanu Reeves is just he's just such an interesting actor because there are some moments that I totally buy him, but for most of the movie I'm like, it's Keanu Reeves. Like,
well, I think Keanu Reeves has like two levels. He's either super serious badass or he's a total doof. And he played the total doof at the beginning of the first Matrix really well, where he didn't really understand what was going on around him and was just so lost, and then he plays the total badass, which is essentially what he does in the John Wick films as Neo. But then the other layer, I guess, on top of that is that he's forced to love Carrie-Anne Moss in these movies too, and that's really like the big driving point of Neo in these movies, is more than anything his love for Trinity. For whatever reason, we can nitpick that all day. That's his only motivation in these movies, and that's the only thing that gives him any stakes in the second movie is, can he make sure that she survives? I also don't like how he brought her back to life. Super ridiculous. Like, you can talk about how ridiculous kissing somebody back to life is, but at least it's like a common trope, I guess. And if we look at The Matrix as just a standalone, you can almost not care about it. But for then it to become a trope where they find super convoluted ways to bring each other back to life, and in this case, sticking his hand in, grabbing the bullet, and then massaging the heart back to beating, which definitely doesn't mess up anything else on the way to her heart, when he just sticks his hand in there with total disregard for everything else as far as her anatomy is concerned. Apparently that works.
Well, to be fair, I mean, it's not actual anatomy.
No, it's not. You're right. It's digital anatomy. But then in that case, how does it make any sense? Why does he even have to do it? Exactly. Exactly. It's so weird and stupid.
Yeah.
You know my favorite movie where the anti-hero kisses the hero back to life?
Stop it.
Rise of Skywalker.
Don't even fucking say it.
That's the one.
Don't even say it. All right, and that's the stream, everyone. Thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed the Disenfranchised podcast. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Oh, no. All right. Sorry, we've upset Andy.
All right, let me get back to hating on this.
Yeah, can we hate the music? Can we please get to that?
Let's get to the music. Let's move on.
Thank you. Music.
What was this score? All right, I have to know your honest opinions, because I couldn't really tell when we were talking about this before the podcast. I could not stand this score. Who wrote it? Music, Don Davis.
Don Davis.
That's the first one. Who wrote
and the second? It's all the same guy.
Okay, Don Davis phoned it in on this second movie. He phoned it in because it
so
was
did everybody else. He was just following the curve.
We didn't talk about the first one. So did you like the music in the first movie, Zach?
Yeah, I thought it was really fitting, actually.
Yeah. I think it's just to talk about the music itself. I think it has highlights and definitely some blights in it. Like, I obviously like orchestral style music in films. A big fan of Star Wars. Obviously, makes sense that would be the thing. But there's just so much of a mix of non-orchestral music with this that I don't like it. I wish it stuck with one or the other. But in this particular film, very jarring, not good.
Not good.
Not good.
The first movie, I thought, did a great job of blending soundtrack with score, with electronic music, with orchestral music. Did an awesome job. This just did not execute at all to the movie of what it's trying to portray. And following along, like, they're like almost exclusively silence in dialogue. There was just pulsing all over the place when the ships were up and in Zion. It was just constant pulsing. It was just not a good score for me. And I usually don't really notice scores all that much unless they suck.
Yes,
and
same.
This one sucked.
Yeah, I didn't really notice much myself, like I said beforehand, just because I was so focused on everything that was so wrong with what was going on in the movie. But that also maybe speaks to how bad it is too, because I can remember things from the first movie, whether it's the orchestral scores or the kind of rock tunes in them, just very 1999. It fits that time, it fits the movie, it fits the action, and those are exclusively to the action scenes. I don't remember anything from this movie, and I think that speaks to how bad it is as well, that I don't remember it, that I was so distracted by how bad everything else was that I can't even think of anything from this score.
I'll tell you, you're not missing much. It was rough.
Yeah,
it was rough. I really didn't like it.
The musical motifs carry on from the first movie, so he uses similar themes in both. It's just it becomes really weird, and it doesn't seem to fit in the second one.
Yeah, I agree. It's just the way he uses those themes. It's not fitting to the scenes that they're used in. It doesn't make sense with the action going on. It doesn't make sense with the relationship between the actors. It doesn't make sense with the emotion that you're supposed to feel from those scenes. And I feel like if it was a better score, we could get more out of those emotional scenes. You know, like the one with Carrie-Anne Moss and Keanu Reeves naked in a bed, right? Like that's supposed to be a really evocative scene, but it was a little laughable to me. It didn't really hit the way I think it was intended to. For me, you know, maybe it hit different for you guys, but it was not it was supposed to be serious. I did not take it seriously at all. I thought it was really weird. And so, like, just things like that. Like, there are ways to execute a score to improve, to expose the emotions in specific scenes, and I don't think this did it. I think it may have done the opposite, if anything at all.
I agree with you wholeheartely, Zach, on that.
That's I've been dying to say that. Thanks for indulging me. I really hated this score. I thought it was
it's going to make me pay a little bit more attention to that, because I usually don't notice scores unless they really stand out to me. So I'm actually excited to go into other movies paying attention a little bit more to that, especially that this stood out to you so much.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, it doesn't. You really shouldn't notice a score all that much, right? You might notice the themes, the recurring themes, and everything, but the idea of a score is to just enhance the viewing experience.
Yeah, and flow with the movie.
You shouldn't notice it that much. I noticed it a lot. It just stood out to me in a negative way.
Because it's so jarring. It takes you out of watching the movie. That's my big issue with Rogue One. I think there are similarities where like you have a style that doesn't necessarily fit what the scene is trying to get you to believe, and so there's like an emotional disconnect between the music choice and what the scene is portraying, and that happens frequently. And I can't think of an example, just because like it just happens throughout the whole movie. I feel like even during the fight sequences, there's this theme which is reused, but it's just because maybe the sequences are so long that the music becomes annoying. Like it's this very high-pitched brassy wave kind of sounds, like wow, but with like a trumpet sound, and a like very metallic-y too, and it's just very long because these scenes are long, so it just becomes annoying after a while. Where in the first one, I think they were shorter, those fight scenes, so those themes didn't seem as annoying, and we didn't like hear over and over again, because a fight scene in this movie would like happen, like, okay, the fight scene is going, and then like 15 minutes later, you're like, all right, this fight scene's still going, and then like the music would have to like kind of play catch up, but it never breathed. It never gave you a chance to step back and, you know, enjoy the ride. Instead, you're like jarred the whole time.
Yeah, I could not agree more. And you know, I think that the score kind of reminded me. You know, you're talking about like that repetitive fight scene music, right? You know, it's almost like a bad Mad Max score. Like it's just almost sound effects over music in score. It's just a repetitive sound effect over and over and over again, and it's not evocative in any way. It's just to be noisy, to inflict that sort of emotion, that noisy, busy, extreme emotion onto the viewer. So,
well, it's anyway, like filling dead air for the sake of doing it, as if people can't get through anything without sound in the background. If anything, some of those scenes might even be better off with nothing going on if the action is so intense
Yeah, well, they tried that in some dialogue, and they needed something there too. It was like
in dialogue for sure.
Silence in dialogue. No, it shouldn't be though. They should have some hits, some movement in dialogue. You can't just be silent the whole sequence.
It would have helped if there was like a love motif between Neo and Trinity. Like if there was something that we heard every single time, like maybe at their first meeting, we get this little motif. It could be mysterious but like still soothing and give you the sense of love and longingness or something like that, and then get developed throughout these movies. But I don't think that much thought was put into it because this was never maybe supposed to go beyond one movie.
Right.
Or was it thought to that
they
detail?
should have underlaid the sound that Neo made when he simultaneously finished and saw her death. Very quietly underlay every scene that they're together.
I agree.
That would have been great.
Yeah.
That's it. That's what we're looking for.
Hell yeah.
It might have worked. You might have been into it. You've been like, damn, this is hot.
I just wrote the score for The Matrix 4. Thank you.
Well, unfortunately, Don Davis is writing it, so we're in for the same exact.
They'll find me on Venmo. Don't worry, they'll pay me.
Oh my god! All right, guys, we're pretty long on this stream here, so let's jump into the third movie, The Matrix Revolutions. Ted, give us a breakdown of The Matrix Revolution.
Well, The Matrix Revolutions, and I forgot to mention this part at the end of Reloaded, by the way. Neo's in a coma at the end of that movie because for some reason he can stop Sentinels with his mind, which is cool, but obviously not explained. So he ends the movie in a coma.
We'll get there.
Yeah. Having stopped the Sentinel with his mind. There's also another character in a coma that we'll find out is a character that we know, but we know that, but the characters in the movie don't know that at the time. But while in the coma, Neo starts off at the train station, which is a kind of purgatory, I guess, within the Matrix.
Yeah.
And that kind of goes into a lot more of the confusion as far as where the line is between programs and people in the Matrix, because there's a family who are programs and they have a daughter, which confuses the ever-living fuck out of me. But either way, that's kind of a thing. They talk for a little bit. He's planning on getting on the next train with them, and the train conductor recognizes him and tells him that he can't come. So later on, when Trinity and Morpheus and the rest of the team figure out where Neo is, they go in to rescue him, and it's really not that difficult, I guess.
Well, they got to go back to Frenchie.
Right, that's right. Well, that's what's not difficult. So one of the things I don't like about this movie, I'll just touch on it quickly, is that they almost set up a cool scene where they're going to have an all-out fight, and then they just decide, or actually have a mission and stakes to get to Neo, and they end that with Trinity just pointing a gun in the Frenchman's face, which kind of deflates that entire scene. So yeah, after they meet with the Frenchman, they get to the train station, they get Neo, they jack him out of the Matrix, and everybody is preparing for war against the machines. So big plot point in the rest of the movie is the people of Zion are fighting against the machines because they're coming, and a lot of Sentinels are coming to get them. And I guess Neo, he decides to kind of go on his own path and try to stop this from happening in his own way. Nobody really believes in him other than obviously his crew. I'm kind of falling apart here, guys. I'm getting tired. I don't know if you guys want to pick up where I left off.
Well, so I can fill in a couple of blanks. So when Neo comes out of the Matrix, or I guess even prior to that, so it ends with him. The last movie ends with him talking to the architect, which really sets up his journey in Revolutions. And what is his journey? We find out throughout the movie, but he basically goes off separately with Trinity from the rest of the crew. They both have the same I guess, end game in mind, which is to stop the Sentinels, but they're doing it in sort of different ways. The main crew, which is Morpheus's ship, with the captain who's kind of a dickhead, who won't let the woman driver kind of call the shots. They're all going on one, and then Neo and Trinity are taking the other ship to go to I don't even know what is that exactly that they're going to. I couldn't really.
The Robot City.
A Robot City, yeah.
The Robot City. So it's just like the main motherboard or power supply for the entire world.
It's kind of the headquarters of the Sentinels, essentially, where they run the Matrix.
But I guess it seems what I couldn't understand is exactly how big that is. Like, is it for the entire world? Is it for this particular section or segment of the world? What is this, like, exactly?
It's talked about in the Animatrix, but think of it as just like the computer mainframe. So for the purpose of this movie, don't worry like what the location of it, how big and all of that. It's just like the computer mainframe. That's where they got to get to. Where does the Matrix exist? Like, yes, they plug into it, but like
right.
We're on the internet right now from our own locations, but we're all connected to the internet. And where's the internet? The internet is this distributed thing of network devices, these computers essentially in all these different locations. So I'm not really in one location, I'm distributed amongst all these other smaller computers. Well, now take
the motherboard of the world.
So now take all of those computers.
The central hub of the internet is Al Gore's house.
And Al Gore, exactly, right in his basement, next to the dungeon room where he keeps the man-bear pig.
Right.
All right. I kind of got all that. I just wasn't sure exactly like the magnitude of where they were going. I kind of understood it based on the God machine that we hear at the end.
Yeah.
We get it, but it wasn't super clear exactly what it was.
Ready? The easiest answer, Zach, is it's the robot analog of Zion.
Yeah, but I guess Zion is one particular place that we're focused on.
And so is
more Zions.
Well, that's the whole premise of the movie. That's the last thing of humanity. There are like a couple things, like there's a surface group, but they end up getting killed in the Animatrix, and we don't know of anyone else. I don't think. Like, people are like, you're either on Zion or in Zion or you're not. You're in the Matrix.
So it's like the last bastion of humanity.
Yeah, like that's it. And same thing with like the robots essentially. So they've kind of, what they've done is they've gone from being all over the planet, they were forced into this one location, and then they kind of destroyed the rest of the world and ended up going underground and creating the battery with the humans. We are forgetting a very important plot point here, which is those characters we need to pay attention to. Not all the ancillary bullshit characters, but it's the Oracle. We forgot about that. That's a vital piece of this, is the Oracle tells them what they need to do. Finally, Neo shows up and he goes, listen, bitch, I'm done with all these unanswered questions. Give me some real answers now. Tell me exactly, what's going on. And so that reveals what's happening, where she is telling him, you know what you got to do. You know, you have to go. You got to do these things. So that's like the motivation for everything.
Which kind of leads me to my question at the beginning of this to you was, do you feel that the franchise answers the question, there's more value in choice than destiny? Right? Because I think that the Oracle through this whole thing is trying to get the point across that your determination is what makes the difference. But I don't know that it executes on that.
No, not determination. Not that like you wanna go and do it. It's the fact that you acknowledge that you must do it. There's a difference. Not that you keep trying, because you can keep trying without actually it's not like the drive, because that's what you're referring to, is like the motivation to do it. But it's the act of realizing, no, the important thing here is that I am choosing to do it. That it is the self, not set forth by all these, like the the Frenchman says, where he thinks all he sees is causalities, right? He doesn't see the why, he just sees as the cause for things. You know, is it the intention, blah blah. No, he's just, there's cause and effect. But Neo demonstrates the opposite. He has this radical self-actualization that the most important thing about being human is that we make choices. And when we acknowledge that we have the power to make choices, that's where we unlock our true potential. So where it isn't that there's this like, the question is answered, determinism versus free will.
I guess my point is the Oracle kind of pushes back on that premise.
Yeah.
She's almost like, well, you're gonna do it because you're destined to do it. I'm just here to get you there.
Yeah, and that's what happens in every iteration. So that's what ties back to the second film. So here, like, this is like the unfolding moment of what's exactly happening in these movies, is that the architect reveals the story's been repeating over and over again. This is a loop that we essentially created. We knew there was going to be an abnormality. It's an inherent flaw of my almost nearly perfect system I created, is that there will always be this dissenter. So rather than try to prevent the flaw from occurring, we just kind of take advantage of it. So you let the flaw go all the way out and fold and fold and fold until you can plan for something, which is the culminating event of Scion being attacked, where the architect tells Neo, in the instance of the Chosen One, hey, if you choose to go through and try to defeat me, Zion's gonna get destroyed, or you kind of just give up, we hit the reset button, and we'll do this all over again on the next cycle. So that's the difference, is that in this instance, in this iteration of the cycle, number whatever we're on, the Oracle is aware of that flaw, and she goes, okay, so we just have to exploit it. I have to somehow convince Neo, this chosen one here, that once he realizes that he does have the ability to choose, and that's the powerful thing that sets him apart, that's what's going to break this machine. That's what's going to end this cycle. And it's wrapped up in that final last bit scene there where the Oracle's like talking, did you know it was going to happen? No, I didn't know it was going to happen, and that's the point, but I knew if I believed in him, he would do it. I chose to believe in him. I chose that I would trust this guy, the one, to do the right thing.
But again, that's his destiny, right? He's the one. You believe in him to do it. It's not just anybody that can do it. It's him that can do it. That's his destiny. So where does choice come into it? Sure, he makes the choices that he's destined to make, arguably, but he is the only one that could do it. Trinity couldn't do it.
Correct.
Couldn't do it.
Because he is the flaw in the machine. So that's why. So the deterministic part of this, like, you can't get rid of determinism. You're still always going to have cause and effect. That's the difference. So just because he was destined to do it, that's why I don't like the answer either. So I said, like, they do answer it, but I don't necessarily like it. It's that we're kind of in this mix of things where we do have free will, but ultimately, like, we kind of don't, in some essence. Like, that's the beautiful part about humans, is we're this messy thing. The robots are this very logical, they follow the rules, they don't really have a choice, and when they do have a choice, it seems to not really work out for them. Or like Agent Smith says, like, all those human qualities, love, you're experiencing that. That's a fleshy human thing that really doesn't even matter and whatnot. But that part is what makes you human. And that's the same thing with choice, the ability that we have choices. Even though we're trapped in this deterministic world, we have this little bit of free will that we get to exercise, and it's all about how we choose the action that we take. Because he was destined, he was the chosen one to be the flaw in the system, but the flaw was always going to resort to him going back and repeating the cycle. It's kind of like this chance thing, because he chose, that he broke the cycle. So the deterministic part is kind of undercut because we're led to believe he's the chosen one. So it's fate, but it's really not fate. That the deterministic part was designed in the system. Neo was literally chosen because it's a flaw in the system.
I don't know. That particular theme obviously didn't land quite as clearly for me as it did for you, and that's okay. I think your explanation was extremely helpful in trying to understand the theme that they were trying to portray, but it didn't get me there on my own.
Well, no, these movies were not good at that.
No. So, yeah, really interesting take on that. I can definitely appreciate with that explanation where your head's at in terms of the execution of that theme. Maybe not execution, but thought.
Yeah, definitely not the execution. No, yeah. I don't like how it ends in that way. Right. Like where it's like, oh, so he was the chosen one all along, so he knew this, but the fact that he chose to do these things is what makes it, kind of breaks it. But you have to just accept the fact, well, no, he's only the chosen one because that's what the system did. It had a flaw, so it kind of made him the thing. So that's the prophecy. Kind of explains it away. And
then he gets his eyes burnt up.
Yep.
That's the thing that happens.
We left that out.
Yep.
And then he starts to see everything in machine, essentially.
Yeah, and he loses his sight versus Agent Smith in the real world, who hijacks an actual person by infecting his Matrix avatar.
Right.
So that's... I did really like that from the second movie, that they inserted that plot point that was going to be actualized in this movie, where he tracked down one person who lived in Zion amongst everybody within the Matrix, which must have been difficult to do, and infected and hijacked him. The logistics of like how, I guess, don't really matter, but it's really interesting that he, a machine, was able to get out into the real world and fight Neo one-on-one in a different arena where the stakes are the same, but also I guess the way they are able to fight is different, even though Neo seemingly has abilities outside of the Matrix, from what you can see with his ability to stop the Sentinels.
Yeah, no,
I mean, yeah, definitely, but obviously not on the level that he does within the Matrix. So it's more of an even fight where it's a man versus man rather than super powered being within the Matrix versus a program that can really only give him a fight if there are many upon many of him fighting him at the same time. So I really like that dynamic in this movie, even though a lot of it wasn't executed the best.
Yeah, I mean, here's the difference in that real world fight. I mean, you mentioned the stakes, and I feel like the stakes are actually very different in that fight for Agent Smith and Neo. Agent Smith is he infected, right? He's the virus that infected that avatar that now became the real life human, and so that virus leaked into the real world. But True. Agent Smith is still a virus in the Matrix. No matter what happens to him through that avatar, that's not going to change his end goal in the Matrix. However, for Neo, the stakes are exponentially higher, given that his real world is his world, whereas the Matrix is Agent Smith's world. So
yeah, you're absolutely right.
I mean, I found that actually incredibly interesting, that dynamic, because really Agent Smith had nothing to lose, or at least the infected avatar had nothing to lose other than trying to stop Neo from doing what he's doing, obviously. But it wasn't going to like harm the virus of the Matrix, Agent Smith virus, in any way. So Neo had to win that in order to be able to proceed on his journey.
Yeah, I definitely misspoke when I said the stakes were the same. So thanks for correcting on that one. Yeah, that is definitely an interesting part of that fight, for sure. Definitely raised the stakes more than anything else in the second movie ever did. And that's kind of why I like this movie more, because it felt like the stakes were real this time. The second movie seemed like such an impasse, a go-between between the first movie and the third movie, where you knew we were eventually going to get here, and that they made it even worse by lowering the stakes within the second movie, like right in front of your face, on top of the fact that you knew if there was going to be a third movie, we'd get there eventually anyway. So I really enjoyed the fact that, specifically in this fight, but also in general, that this movie had higher stakes, that it felt more real, like something was actually there to be lost, as opposed to the second movie. And that's really where like the difference in enjoyment comes for me.
Yeah, I agree with all of that, guys. One more thing to add to this plot discussion, just to tie it together, why and same thing to your point, Ted, too, why I like this movie better than the second one, is it ties together the pieces that were introduced in 1 and 2. So like 2 threw up all this stuff at us. It was like, what's going on here? There's so many more things to know about than I knew in the first one. This third movie gave us some more important answers. So for specifically plot stuff, not everything, but how we see that Agent Smith is the opposite. It's even told in this, think like yin and yang, the opposite of Neo. He's maybe the chosen one version in the Matrix side of things, because this has never happened in any of the previous iterations. Agent Smith didn't go crazy. Thus why crazy god dude at the end of this movie is like, yeah, I'll let you do this so you can stop this guy from fucking our shit up. So you've got the Neo and Mr. Smith. It gives us the answer to like what's going on with the Oracle. She's kind of like the agent, or the opposite to the Architect. The Architect plans out this thing, meticulous detail, it's near perfection, but the Oracle, who you think is all about like the future and knowing things, it's also about like what you don't know, because if you aren't sure of your choices, she can't see that future. So that's the idea, is like she realizes that, you know, you might have planned everything perfectly, but you can't even be aware of the things. You won't know what's going to happen in the future if you don't believe in the things that you're supposed to, or what's like that you have the ability to do those things, which is a cool point. And then you have the kind of the opposite characters, where you get to see, okay, Zion's this thing with people and caring, but you also get to see the caring about the people in the Matrix, the programs, because we get introduced to the little girl who is the daughter of that person we saw in the last movie, and why we want to care about the programs is that they're kind of like us. They're the analogs of humans in this virtual world created by the robots. So I like how that's what this movie does, is it gives you a nice story of those things that we want to pay attention to, the main characters, the overall plot, and the overall theme. I think it does a nice job of giving me things that are satisfying, that ties it all together.
This movie definitely had a way better balance of all of that than Reloaded, for sure. I think the original Matrix set the tone for the series, and then the subsequent movies just kind of took that story to another level, just totally redirected it and moved it to the kind of the end game. And I think that this movie really did a good job at tying up some of those loose ends, like you were saying, throughout those story threads, that messy as they might have been, they did really tie it up to a fairly satisfactory point for me.
I agree.
So that's that. I think that's our plot discussion. Let's breeze through this here. I think, for at least for me, guys, the action and CGI in this is pretty reminiscent of the second movie. CGI really didn't change at all. I mean, they were released in the same year, so we had kind of the same technology available in making the movie, as well as really the same CGI aspects in the movie itself. I mean, there was really not a whole lot of environment change outside of maybe the robot city that would change at all the technology and CGI in the movie.
I'll just jump in. Something I really like about this is similar to the last point I made about making connections to the previous movies, how Neo's like robot vision in the real world is like an analog to his vision in the digital world of the Matrix. So like how he sees the numbers, of the Matrix and things like that. That's what this kind of is too. And I like that visual element that they added, that we see it now from the real world. And didn't really do anything groundbreaking CGI wise with it, but they had to use CGI, so I liked what they did with it.
Yeah, and I actually like that from a storytelling standpoint too, because it's reminiscent of I don't know if you guys ever watched the Netflix series, the Daredevil Netflix series, but the way they show that he's able to see, so to speak, is kind of like an infrared spectrum where he can kind of see and sense these things on a different wavelength than what everybody else can. So it's not just that he's got hypersensitivity as far as hearing and smell and everything like that, but it's also he's got an extra sense that's on top of the senses that we already have, maybe arguably better than the normal sense of sight that we have. And you know, especially in a world that's dominated by machines, you can make the argument that it's more valuable for Neo to be able to see the machines the way he does than to be able to see traditionally, especially as we get closer to the end of the movie. So I really like that from a storytelling standpoint, and I could see where, I know Daredevil was the thing before obviously these movies, but I think maybe where that TV show got kind of their ideas of how to portray that, they might have gotten a little bit of that from the influence of this movie. So I really enjoyed that aspect of it.
That's a good point. That's an added component I really hadn't considered, just based on the the CGI conversation. But that component is really important to the overall plot. It's a little cheesy to see the headband over the eyes,
right?
But other than that, I think that I think it is a good component that you're talking about. Anything else? I mean, I think the only other thing I wanted to touch on here is the action is relatively the same, but I think a lot better paced than the last movie. The pacing of everything, just in terms of the duration, the frequency, just made everything feel so much smoother in this movie.
I didn't like the Sentinel stuff, the action in it. I don't know if that would classify as like I guess we were calling it like the action sequences and whatnot.
That's
just because it's a lot of CGI, right? It's like pretty much you get the weird robot things. So the whole like battling for Zion, I don't really care for. But the Agent Smith fight with Neo at the end, I think is pretty cool. I like everything they're doing. I like how, again, it brings back elements from the previous movies, how like they go into the one building and it's very reminiscent of the training room that they're in the first one. So that overall fight sequence, like really, really good in my opinion.
Agreed.
Yeah. And I think even though they used obviously a lot of the same level of technology in this movie that they did in the previous one, because it was made in the same year, I think they learned from the mistake of having a lot of the fights in the second movie in daylight, where things are a lot easier to see as far as flaws. And instead in this movie, whether it's talking about the Sentinel fight, and I do agree with you, Andy, it's not the greatest, but at least the Sentinels are dark themselves and everything around it was pretty dark as well. So the flaws are a little better hidden. I think if that were in daylight or some kind of lighting, it would look a lot worse. And the same goes for the Agent Smith versus Neo fight, where it's torrential downpour in the dark and it's only the one Agent Smith versus him. I think where the fight from the second movie with Agent Smith really started to go off the deep end was when they added so many Agent Smiths, and then that's when it got into the rubbery looking CGI characteristics. When it's just the one, it shifts the focus to just one-on-one. It's easier to animate and it just looks a lot cleaner, I think. And I think the dark aesthetic worked a lot better in hiding the flaws. Even though it's not great, I think it looks a lot better because of that. Just that simple thing to hide a lot of the flaws that they had in it.
Yeah, I agree. I like that. The fact that I never even thought of that being daylight and how important lighting is to make something look realistic. So in the last movie, it subtracts. In this case, when it's in the dark, it adds to it.
Right.
Zach, you want to talk about the music?
I don't really have much to add here, actually. I mean, it's the same, kind of the same score aspects of the movie prior. I don't think there was really, I didn't notice it as much, which I guess is good. But there were a lot of pulsing, and I think it's also because a lot of the movie was just really, really loud.
Yeah.
And I guess that's a flaw of the series in general. The action scenes were so loud and busy and noisy that you really didn't get a lot of musical motifs in them. But other than that, I mean, it's like I said, it's pretty similar to the movie prior. Not too much to add there. We have basically the same cast of actors. Cornel West being again the best,
reprises his role
of those actors.
Counselor West.
And that's my take on it. I think this movie was largely inoffensive. I think it tied up a few loose ends that needed to be tied up. If you guys don't mind, let's go, because we're running really long on this podcast. Yeah. Let's jump to the ending. What did you guys think of the ending of the series here? Like,
well, it's not done yet.
What are you talking? All right, of the 3 movies, then we'll get into 4.
Thank you.
Of the 3 movies, 2 sentences. What did you think of it?
You can go ahead, Andy. I'm thinking.
Wait, say that. What's the question again, Zach?
So the ending of the movie, the way everything wraps up in Revolutions. What did you think of the ending and how it tied to the rest of the story?
I liked everything up until the final sequence between the Oracle and the architect. With the little girl. Thought that was totally unnecessary. Didn't need it. I think we could have speculated about Neo and what his fate was after the final fight without her being like, who knows if I'll see him again. Like, that's the thing she doesn't know. She wants to believe it, but she can't yet or something, which kind of contradicts like her whole thing about like we can't know the things that we don't want. And like you would think if she likes Neo and wants him, she would be able to use her power and see, but she can't. So that little bit aside, I just didn't like it. I don't think it fits. It's like bad CGI there with like the whole sky thing, the little girl, just the acting isn't good. So that part takes me out. If we had ended the movie without that final sequence, that scene there, I think I would have been like, yeah, that was a really good ending to this movie.
Yeah, just imagine the end of the movie. Zion celebrates.
Yep.
Neo is flat on his back in the Machine City, and that's it. Like, that's the end of the movie. I feel like that would be a perfect ending. Like, the war is over. We don't know what happened to Neo.
But even the part where like the robot thing like starts to like take him away someplace, I like that too. Like,
well, yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, not that he's just laying there, but like we see him like move in, like they getting carried away. Okay, I want to keep that part because I like that.
Yeah, I think it's really cool. I think it's very speculative. What do you think happened?
Who knows?
I think he's the savior of everyone, so he's gonna be kind of like worshipped in a way.
I think they took him away to grow his hair out so he could continue to make John Wick movies at the same time as The Matrix 4.
That's actually a really good, smart idea.
You'd also look great with a beard, Neo.
Well, you're actually probably not wrong. It makes him look older too, so it adds to the fact that time has passed. I just a little quick point here. I think the architect and the god figure are 2 different entities within the robots.
The god robot versus the architect in the Matrix.
Yeah, I don't think it's the same person. I think
you don't think that the architect is the avatar for the god robot.
Correct. Yeah, I think it's the god robot is a completely separate entity who doesn't necessarily like, he might not even be in the Matrix. He could live outside the Matrix entirely. But the architect is the guy that built the Matrix. Like, so it's just like that was his purpose. So this robot, his purpose is to like be the leader of everyone, not just the people in the Matrix, but the robots that live outside of the Matrix.
So that's President Robot.
Yes. Which is talked about in the Animatrix.
Renowned Animatrix.
I'll never know.
Ted, why don't you go ahead on your point here? skip over the Animatrix talk.
Yeah, I just think overall that this movie, and maybe it's because it comes off of such a bad movie in the second one, it actually surprisingly wraps things up very well with a neat little bow. And I just thought too that the way the pacing was done and the way that this movie didn't focus too much on action for too long, and again, I think this might just be a symptom of watching these movies back to back, but I thought it just did such a better job than the second one and wrapped things up in a nice way. I don't know. I agree with Andy. You could definitely do without that very last scene with the Oracle and the Architect and the little girl, because it takes away a lot of that nice speculation that you get that's kind of reminiscent of the very first Matrix movie, where that leaves off on kind of a speculative note. Like, is he the one? Is he not the one? It sure looked like he was the one, but we don't know. And could have just left it right there. Movies can gain so much from just leaving questions in the air for the audience, as long as they're not things that are just so integral to the story that you can't have the story. It's fun to have that type of thing, and it really leaves people talking about it afterward and thinking about it further, and then you can have a nice revisit to it when you come back with another movie 15 years later. It is what it is. It ended the way it did, and that's fine. I thought overall it wrapped it up pretty well, though.
All right, so let's talk about it. So Matrix 4 is coming out. Is it this year?
2021.
Well, it was supposed to be. Was it supposed to be this year? Did it get postponed, or was it supposed to be next year?
I think it was always planned for 2021.
2021.
I think so. 2022, excuse me. That might have been pushed back then. Yeah.
Man, I thought it was really bad. Okay. Well, so in that vein, so we know what's happened thus far in the story with 3 movies. What happens next? What happens in the Matrix 4? First of all, does anybody know anything about the film? Like, are there any plot details released?
If there are, I don't know anything about them. I only speculated on the stuff that I know about how Keanu Reeves is going to look in the movie. I think there was a still as far as how he's supposed to look. There was a set photo of him, and it's very close to how he looks in pretty much every movie right now, whether it's Bill and Ted with long hair, clean shaven, or just John Wick where he's got the beard with long hair. Generally, just long hair Keanu is a great Keanu for everybody.
Yeah, I definitely think they're feeding into that success of John Wick for sure.
I just checked to see if there's anything. There have been like things reported from various people involved throughout like the entire development process, which was before the movie was even greenlit. So like, you know, pre-production, things like that. But we haven't gotten anything truly relating to the plot other than the fact that it's going to be, you know, obviously in the future. Yeah, they're like still in negotiations with people apparently for their roles. Like characters who died in the first movie actually coming back somehow, apparently.
Yeah, we're going to hate that for sure.
Well, I mean, it wouldn't be unprecedented with this series.
Yeah, and depends on like how they do it, of course, like wait and see. I don't know. Actually, this is like something where I don't see what they're going to do next with it because they left it so open-ended. I can speculate that perhaps you've got some outside party to this. So we have this cast of characters, but who knows? Maybe there's a character that we weren't introduced in these movies that can be like a new antagonist to like re-spark this war. If there's anything to draw from that last scene that I don't like in the movie, it's where they talk about like, oh, well, you think there's going to be peace? And he's like, for now, we'll keep it. Like, oh, so I mean something could happen. So maybe there will be some kind of tension that breaks open again, some kind of spark that's going to reignite the war between humans and robots.
I can tell you that the Frenchman's going to be in it.
Oh, that's unfortunate.
He's got to be.
This character's in it.
Not
Neil
a fan.
Patrick Harris is in it.
What?
He's credited.
Wow.
No Morpheus.
Oh yeah, and it was supposed to be coming out in May of 2021 and got delayed to April of 2022 because of COVID.
So, I mean, I really have no major speculation about this movie. I have no idea what it could be. I'm sure that they'll lean on nostalgia pretty heavily, and I'm sure that I'll criticize it for that. But
spoons galore.
Yeah, right. All I'm saying is that I am actually looking forward to a Matrix 4 after seeing all of these movies, regardless of how I felt about the last two, specifically number 2. It's got me excited. You know, like I said, the last movie really tied up everything. It was really a satisfactory movie for me, and I wasn't expecting it to be after number 2. So given that, going into number 4 should be pretty cool.
Yeah, it's hard to speculate on what's going to happen in the next one because things weren't left very open-ended. I'm excited too. I agree. Even though the second movie was balls, in my opinion, one movie was great and another movie was okay. And that's good enough to get me excited for something that's going to have a 4th movie in the series. And I like a lot of the actors in it too, so that's exciting as well.
What are your thoughts on an Animatrix 2?
I'll never watch it.
Well, I gotta tell you, I really appreciate the insights that you could provide from the Animatrix. I'm really glad that you watched it so that I didn't have to. Just to know that there are some answers out there. That being said, I don't care enough about those answers to go search them out.
Yeah, I don't want a second Animatrix, just to be clear. We don't need another one.
Yeah, and all joking aside about the Animatrix, Zach's right. It did lend itself pretty well to helping the conversation go along, specifically because there were some answers to the questions that we had. So that was nice, Andy, and I appreciate you watching it.
Oh, you're welcome. My childhood was probably like fucked up partially from watching it when I shouldn't have been watching it because of how weird it is.
It's a sacrifice that had to be made. Well, that'll wrap up. Huh?
I was just you're on the right track. I said, what do you think? I think this you're in the same mindset I am. Go for it.
I'm flashing the light. I'm flashing the light.
We're all very tired, everybody. Well, that's going to wrap up the Matrix series. So thanks to anybody who joined us. I saw a few people in the chat. That was great. There are definitely some great things to take from this series that influence cinema going forward, and that's definitely something valuable. But obviously, it wasn't without its flaws, and we expounded upon those a lot. Let's unplug and get a little bit more grounded for our next series. We've decided that we're going to talk about Indiana Jones, which will be exciting. So that'll be a 4-movie series, 3 of which I've heard are very good. 1 of which I've seen is very bad, the last one. So I'm excited to watch the first 3. I watched the first one recently, and I'm excited to watch the other 2 after that, and hopefully not have as bad memories as I do about the Crystal Skull.
I'm looking forward to that one. That should be fun. I've seen all of them in bits and pieces, but I'm looking forward to seeing them all kind of in a row.
Do we include the TV show as a part of it? Young Indiana Jones? No. Okay.
Young Indiana Jones?
No, Young Indiana.
Absolutely not. Did you say yes? Who said yes?
Are you not committed to this?
No, not that much.
Andy watched the Animatrix. I'm going to watch the series, and I'm going to add some lore.
Okay. What if each time we do one of these things, at least one of us has to watch the like kind of sort of ancillary material that's not related. That's like not. Yeah, fuck you. No, that's not fair. Okay, then you have to watch Ewok. No, then you have to watch the Ewoks movies.
I would watch that.
Sure.
Okay, damn it. All right, I wanted.
All right, this has gone on too long.
Thanks,
We're done.
guys.
We're done.
All right, I'm done talking about these movies. They're not that good. I'll see you guys later. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, find us on most podcast platforms like Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Follow us on Twitter @FranchiseFlix for new episodes and other content. You can follow Andy on Twitch and Instagram @Darth Buckman, and follow Zach on Twitter @_Zach Russo. Talk to you next time.